Now, look, let's talk about Trump tariffs. He's not backing down despite the economy on quite shaky ground worldwide. What has been the reaction over there, particularly from business in America?
Well, I think it's been unsteady. I think there's a lot of somewhat of an insecurity. But at the same time, Danica, you have to remember, and for those of your audience that are watching, especially in Australia, I actually encountered 2 Australians last week, and they did not want to talk about tariffs. It's important to do this because you have to stand up to China. You mentioned he's not backing down. Tom Petty, I won't back down. That song, I think, represents his presidency, and especially with reactions to these tariffs. He understands the Chinese mindset. If you look at his book, The Art of the Deal, he talks about this, how he understands the Chinese mentality. And, they're cutthroat. That's how they are as business people. So what happens is when you go into a situation with China, you have to be able to play ball. You have to play hard. And I think what's happening right now, when you think about 75 nations or more coming to the table to renegotiate with Trump, here's why it's important. You can ban some of those transshipments that China has had for many, many years. And that's why it's important, not just for the two nations to talk about their own tariffs internally, but also how to ice out China economically. So sure, here in the U.S., there's some uncertainty. I won't lie about that. But I think maybe by summer of next year, at latest, we'll see. The market, of course, is going to be volatile. That's, of course, true. But I think ultimately what we could perhaps get to is a place where tariffs could essentially replace the income tax. That would be music to a lot of Americans' ears. So what we consider to be short-term pain is probably better for long-term gain. And here's what else it does. It puts the Chinese in the crosshairs. And I'm talking about their intellectual property theft. I'm talking about economically, trade-wise, what they're doing, the Wuhan flu hound. All of that is because China has ripped us off and ripped the world off for many, many years. And it's time to put the focus on them and realize they can't get away with this anymore. So here in America, I think we've got some unsettledness, but I think we're getting somewhere finally. First president to stand up to them.
Well, yeah, it is an America First policy, and I guess that is what he was elected on, so I can understand it from that perspective. Now, look, let's move on because Joe Biden's attempt to bill $300,000 per speaking appearance is finding few takers. Who would have thought, especially after this shocker this week?
And I'd never seen hardly any black people in Scranton at the time and I was only going in the 4th grade. And I remember seeing the kids going by at the time called colored kids on a bus going by.
Beau, seriously, who would want to pay $300,000 for an incoherent, dribbling rant?
Well, first of all, Danica, he's alive. He's alive. Here we are at Easter. Usually we talk about Jesus Christ's resurrection off the cross, but thank God Joe Biden is actually alive. He's alive and kicking. I got to tell you, Danica, I don't think his speeches command $300, much less $300,000, especially when you make comments like you just played. I think it's safe to say that he's not going to be speaking at the NAACP or any historically black colleges and universities anytime in the near future. It's an unforced error. But shame on CAA, the creative artists agency, for signing him and Kamala Harris, two of the worst speakers imaginable right now. I think what this also shows to Danica is his narcissism. He's a narcissistic money grubber. And I hate to say that about a former president, but he doesn't know when to quit. He didn't get out when the getting was good. He's out there making speeches that nobody wants to hear. And nobody wants to hear about corn pop and the white hair on your legs that happens after you get in the pool with kids. Nobody wants to hear that. So to Joe Biden, I say, we've talked about this many times, Danica, it's time for you to give up entirely. No one's going to pay this amount of money for your speeches because nobody wants to hear you speak.
Yeah, I wouldn't even want to hear him speak for free at this point when you hear that sort of nonsense. Beau Davidson, good to speak with you. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Oh, my pleasure, Danica, always.